Chapter 717. Only the howling of the wind could be heard. Suddenly, an ear-piercing shout broke the silence. "Welcome, my lord." Xing, the Grand Elder of the Heaven Gorge sect, shouted loudly. He knelt down and kowtowed sincerely. He had been following the Heavenly Sage for so many years. Although he didn't know the Heavenly Sage's specific plan, he knew more than others. Plus, he had heard the blood-skinned man's conversation with the Heavenly Sage. How could he not guess? Although he didn't dare to believe it, this was happening right under his nose. This blood-skinned man was a guest from another world, and he had been brought here by the Heavenly Sage using the Blood River Formation. Many years ago, the Heavenly Sage had comprehended the secrets of the Heaven Gorge and obtained a heaven-bestowed technique. That was why he had set up the Blood River Formation here and abducted the living beings of an entire continent to be sacrificed. Now, it seemed that it wasn't a heaven-bestowed technique. Instead, the blood-skinned man had communicated with the Heavenly Sage through the Heaven Gorge. The Blood River Formation had also been passed down by him. It turned out that this was the path that the Heavenly Saint had found. Although it was somewhat different from what he had expected, the path ahead was still the path ahead. People like them had already reached the end of their cultivation, but the appearance of the blood-skinned man allowed him to see the path beyond the end. Therefore, Xing knelt down without hesitation. The Heavenly Sage had set an example. As the Grand Elder, he naturally didn't feel any pressure kneeling. He even pulled Cheng Henfeng, who was standing beside him. Cheng Henfeng was a sword cultivator. In his life, he had only knelt to his parents and master. He had never even knelt to the Heavenly Sage. How could he be willing to kneel to someone of unknown origins? However, his injuries weren't light. When Xing pulled him, he also knelt down involuntarily. "Welcome, my lord." The surviving cultivators of the Heaven Gorge sect all knelt down and shouted loudly. It was a stark contrast to the cultivators of the Allied army, who were still standing in place and didn't know what to do. The blood-skinned man glanced at them with an indifferent expression. He wasn't happy that the cultivators of the Heaven Gorge sect had submitted, nor was he angry that the Allied army didn't obey him. When one world invaded another world, these situations were unavoidable, and he had seen similar scenes many times. He said indifferently, "I am the Blood Clan's Blood Owl from the Blood Realm. Submit to me or..." It was just a simple sentence, but all of the cultivators of the Allied army were struck by a sense of immense panic and pressure. Although some people had already guessed that this person was an extraterrestrial visitor, guessing was one thing, and having someone confirm it with his own mouth was another. No one had ever heard of the Blood Tribe or the Blood Realm. However, since the other party had deliberately come to the Soaring Dragon Realm, it was obvious that they were not here for sightseeing. Moreover, they had given the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm two choices the moment they arrived. There was no room for negotiation at all. It was obvious that they did not come with good intentions. No cultivator would be able to rashly make such a decision when faced with such a choice. "Excellent, excellent." Monk Guangjing took a step forward and stared at Xue Xiao with his torch-like eyes. "May I ask, why did the Blood World invade the Soaring Dragon World?" Xue Xiao turned his head and looked at Guangjing from head to toe. He said calmly, "It's just the law of the jungle." It was a simple logic, but it was irrefutable. "What if I surrender?" Yuan Changzuan asked. Xue Xiao said, "If you plant a blood seal and become a blood slave of the blood race, you will not die." Kuei Yuanshan also stepped forward. "May I ask what your cultivation is?" Xue Xiao's lips curled into a sneer. "You can try." "That's my intention." As Kuei Yuanshan finished speaking, he had already pointed his finger. A spiritual power disk appeared in front of him instantly. The lines on it were crisscrossing, complex and mysterious. A ferocious dragon head appeared from the spiritual power disk, followed by a huge dragon body. It shook its head and wagged its tail as it attacked Xue Xiao. Although it was just a casual attack, Kuei Yuanshan had used all his strength. In the face of this attack, Xue Xiao only punched out. A bloody light appeared in the sky and enveloped the huge dragon that was flying toward him. Spiritual power surged endlessly, and the rumbling sound was endless. Xue Zhao's body shook slightly, and the huge dragon disappeared. Peak of the Cloud River Realm. Many cultivators of the allied forces' eyes lit up. After witnessing the power of the heavenly saint, everyone was extremely fearful of Xuexiao. However, at this moment, it seemed that the reason why the heavenly saint could be so powerful was because of the power of the Blood River formation, not his own power. It had nothing to do with Xuexiao. When Xuexiao took action, his power was completely exposed. Although he was very strong, he had not surpassed the limit of the Cloud River realm. He had given them two choices in a domineering manner, but it turned out that he was only acting cool on the surface. Guang Jing put his palms together in front of his chest, and his face was full of mercy. Benefactor, the Soaring Dragon Realm has no intention of becoming enemies with the Blood Realm. Please return to where you came from. Although they knew that the Blood Clan was not good people, the situation today was too big. Before they knew the details of the Blood Clan, it was not a good idea to rashly start a conflict with them. The best situation now was to chase Xuexiao back. As for whether he could return, since he could come, he could definitely return. It seems that this is your choice, Xuexiao said calmly. If so, he raised his hand and waved it gently. Below the ravine, in the boundless sea of blood, figures rushed out one after another. They were all Blood Clan-esque with blood-red skin and sharp ears. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of Blood Clan-esque appeared, and from the sea of blood, there were even more figures of Blood Clan-esque surging. The allied forces' expressions changed drastically, and they all tried to defend themselves. In an instant, a great battle broke out. The intensity of this battle was completely different from when the allied forces had surrounded the Heaven Ravine sect. The attacking Blood Clan members were obviously much stronger than the Heaven Ravine sect cultivators. Moreover, the Blood Clan's secret techniques were strange. It was the first time the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators encountered such an enemy, and they suffered heavy casualties. However, the defeated Heaven Ravine sect cultivators were happy. They were supposed to die, but who knew that the situation would change like this? Now, under the leadership of the Heavenly Saint, they cooperated with the Blood Clan to counterattack the allied forces. For a time, life on the battlefield kept dissipating, and the allied forces' cultivators kept retreating. In the Medicine Valley, in the thatched hut, Lu Yi frowned and looked at Yi Lioli, who was lying on the bed. Almost at the same time that something strange happened on the Heaven Ravine sect's side, Yi Lioli suddenly screamed and fainted. After coming to the Medicine Valley and being treated by the little fairy doctor, Yi Lioli's old illness did not act up again. Who knew that it would act up for no reason today? Moreover, the situation this time was different from all the previous times. At this very moment, the back of Yi Lioli's clothes had already been cut open. The centipede-like birthmark on her back seemed to have grown a little bigger. Moreover, beside the birthmark, there was actually a dense blood-red glow surging forth, illuminating her spotlessly white back with a dark red glow. At first glance, it looked as if the birthmark had been torn apart by an unknown force. He paced around anxiously, but there was nothing she could do to help. She could only pray that the little fairy doctor's methods would be effective. You two go out first. The little fairy doctor laid Yi Lioli down again and instructed. Lu Yi and Yi obeyed and left the thatched hut. Outside the thatched hut, Huang Liang looked into the distance as if he had lost his soul. Huang Liang had been recuperating in the Medicine Valley these past few days, and he kept in contact with the Imperial Heavenly Sect. Therefore, he was aware of the Allied forces' movements. The news that the Heavenly Saint had fought against 3 top powerhouses under the Heaven Ravine had already spread. Huang Liang did not dare to believe it. Now, he was even more at a loss for what to do with this sudden change. Lu Yi followed Huang Liang's gaze and looked into the distance. She could not help but call out. Lu Yi narrowed his eyes and looked up. In the distant horizon, below the Heaven Ravine that stretched across the sky, a blood-red glow was surging and rolling. It was as if an apocalyptic disaster was about to descend. Even though they were thousands of miles away, it still made one feel uncomfortable. What shocked him was that the current situation at the Heaven Ravine and the reaction of the birthmark on Yi Lioli's back were actually a match. The centipede-like birthmark was extremely similar to the heaven ravine. Now that there was such a match, Lu Yi could not help but have some guesses. Perhaps the reaction of the heaven ravine could be perfectly reflected on Yi Lioli's body? But why was that? Yi Lioli was only the 7th miss of the domineering Saber Villa. What was her connection with the heaven ravine? If that was the case, then there was an explanation for Yi Lioli's illness today. The change of the heaven ravine was reflected on Yi Lioli's body, causing her old illness to relapse. Therefore, if he wanted to solve Yi Lioli's old illness, he had to solve the heaven ravine? Senior, what happened at the heaven ravine? Lu Yi asked. Although the Medicine Valley was not isolated from the rest of the world, there was no way to obtain news from the outside world. Huang Liang was different. He was the sect master of the Imperial Heavenly Sect. Nothing could escape his notice. He had also told Lu Yi and the others about the movements of the Allied army over the past few days. The two little girls, Yi Lioli and Yi, were still happy that the malignant tumor like the Heaven Ravine sect was about to be eradicated. How could it be? How could it be? Huang Liang muttered in a low voice as if he didn't hear anything. Something unexpected had clearly happened at the Heaven Ravine to make someone like him so distracted. And it was something unimaginable. Haha. Huang Liang suddenly laughed maniacally and staggered. Blood tribe? Blood realm? Impossible. How could there be something so unruly? Senior. He looked at Huang Liang worriedly. Lu Yi frowned. What blood tribe? Blood realm? He could not hear what Huang Liang was saying at all. After a long while, Huang Liang's emotions finally calmed down. He turned to Lu Yi stiffly. Little friend, do you believe that there are extraterrestrial visitors in this world? Lu Yi thought that strictly speaking he and Yi were both extraterrestrial visitors. The Dragon Emperor. Lu Yi replied indifferently. Huang Liang faltered for a moment before nodding in realization. That's right. Rumor has it that the Dragon Emperor does not belong to the Soaring Dragon Realm. Since it doesn't belong to the Soaring Dragon Realm, then it must be an extraterrestrial visitor. If there are extraterrestrial visitors, then there must be extraterrestrial visitors. He wiped his face viciously. The sect master of the Heaven Ravine sect, Tian Sheng, set up the Blood River Formation for no other reason than to receive a group of extraterrestrial visitors. 7017K. Chapter 7:18. Outside the thatched hut, Lu Yi saw the many changes in the situation below the ravine as Huang Liang explained in an orderly manner. The Blood Realm, the Blood Valiant clan, and the many Blood clan members pouring out of the Blood Sea. These things were somewhat inconceivable to him. There were humans and demons in the Jianghu continent, as well as in the Soaring Dragon Realm. There were also demons in the realm of beasts that he had entered the last time. However, generally speaking, humans and demons got along rather peacefully. After all, many demons evolved from demon beasts. Apart from these two major races, the only other race that Lu Yi knew was the insect clan. This race, which had almost no spiritual intelligence, only brought destruction and slaughter. Now there was another Blood Clan member. Compared to the insect clan, the Blood Clan was undoubtedly a greater threat because they were no different from humans except for their racial origin. They had the same spiritual intelligence as humans and could even cultivate. Such a group of outsiders suddenly came to the Dragon Soaring Realm, which was naturally a great threat to the entire realm. Heavenly Saint said that he had found a way to cultivate, but he just received a group of guests from outer space. Now the Allied forces have suffered heavy losses, and the cultivation world of the Dragon Soaring Realm is in danger. Heavenly Saint is an eternal sinner. Huang Liang lamented bitterly. If the conflict between the cultivation world of the Dragon Soaring Realm and the Heaven Ravine sect was an internal problem, then the current situation was an external one. It was fine to fight behind closed doors, but who would have thought that Heavenly Saint would take such a step? Young friend, please save my fellow cultivators of the Dragon Soaring Realm. Huang Liang suddenly bowed to Lu Yi. In the past few days, he had been recuperating here and had a lot of exchanges with Lu Yi. Although he couldn't conclude that Lu Yi was the savior in the face of a catastrophe, the formation in the Medicine Valley couldn't be faked. The formation here had exceeded the standard of the cultivation world of the dragon soaring realm. At the moment, the allied forces were defeated and were being hunted down by the Blood Clan and the remnants of the Heaven Ravine sect. Without external help, no one would be able to leave the Snow Province alive. He could certainly go alone, but how useful could he be? Once the allied forces in the Snow Province were wiped out, the cultivation world of the dragon soaring realm would be greatly weakened. Perhaps their backbone would be broken in this battle. The Medicine Valley had become their last hope. In order to pay for the medicine, Lu Yi set up such a shocking array in the Medicine Valley. Not long after, the soaring dragon realm ushered in a great change. With his preconceived notions, Huang Liang vaguely felt that this coincidence should be the result of luck. The Qi of heaven and earth had gathered on one person, allowing him to make arrangements to turn the tide in advance. Of course, he should be the savior of the world. Therefore, when the cultivators of the Alliance army were being hunted down, Huang Liang could only place his hopes on Lu Yi, or rather, on the great formation of the Medicine Valley. Lu Yi naturally knew what he meant. He slowly shook his head and said, "Sect Master Huang, you shouldn't ask me about this. You should ask for the opinion of the owner of this place." "I have no objections." The little fairy doctor's voice came from behind. She walked out and said, "The Medicine Valley is the first to bear the brunt of such a strange change in the Heavenly Gully. When the nest is overturned, no egg can remain intact. Saving people is also saving ourselves. However," she turned to look at Lu Yi, "although the Medicine Valley's array is mysterious, no one here is proficient in array formations. We still need you to control the array's power." Lu Yi nodded. "Sure. In that case, thank you." "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Huang Liang bowed again and hurriedly sent out the message. In fact, before he told Lu Yi about the situation at the Heavenly Gully, he had already sent a message to Kuei Yuanshan, asking him to bring people and escape in the direction of the Medicine Valley. At that time, he did not have time to obtain the consent of Lu Yi and the little fairy doctor. Now that he had remedied the situation, it was not a big deal. "How is Lu Li?" Lu Yi asked while Huang Liang was busy. The little fairy doctor said, "She has temporarily stabilized. But to solve her problem is difficult." "May I ask if the birthmark on Lu Li's back has anything to do with the Heavenly Gully?" The little fairy doctor raised her head and looked in the direction of the Heavenly Gully, laughing bitterly. "You asked me this question. Back then, when your father brought her to find me and saw the birthmark on her back, I immediately thought of the Heavenly Gully. But I only thought that it was a coincidence. In fact, before today I still thought the same. After all, the Heavenly Gully is the Heavenly Gully, and people are people. What connection can there be between people and the Heavenly Gully?" But now, before she finished speaking, her meaning was already very clear. Just as Lu Yi thought, the little fairy doctor also felt that the birthmark on Yi Lioli's back had a lot to do with the Heavenly Gully. Otherwise, there was no reason for such a coincidence. The Heavenly Gully had just changed and it was perfectly reflected on Yi Lioli's body. But what is the connection? The little fairy doctor looked at Lu Yi in confusion. "I'm asking you, who are you asking?" Lu Yi looked away. "If that's really the case, then to cure her problem, I'm afraid we have to solve the Heavenly Gully." Lu Ye's heart was heavy. Solving the Heavenly Gully was easy to say, but who could do it? No one knew why the Heavenly Gully appeared, let alone how to solve it. Of course, from the current information, the appearance of the Heavenly Gully was related to the blood race. Otherwise, the blood race would not have appeared from the Heavenly Gully. Perhaps, he could start with the blood race? Lu Yi was deep in thought. As an outsider and not the real Yi Lu, he naturally did not have a deep relationship with Yi Lioli. But now that his identity was Yi Lu, he had to act according to this identity. When faced with such a problem, the real Yi Lu would naturally not avoid it. Thus, he could only face it head-on. And, the Dragon Emperor. Zhuang Bufan had used the last light of his life to show him the power and danger of the Dragon Emperor. He had originally thought that this was a kind of opportunity that he had obtained the blessing of heaven and earth. But now, it seemed that under the depth of this opportunity, wasn't it also a kind of responsibility? At this critical juncture where heaven and earth were about to collapse, a divine object like the Dragon Emperor suddenly appeared and fell into his hands due to fate. Was it really just a coincidence? Perhaps there were some forces that he could not see that were adding fuel to the fire? He did not know how powerful the blood race was. He only knew how powerful the Dragon Emperor was. However, such a powerful external force was not so easy to borrow. One wrong move and he would die. Zhuang Bufan's fate was a good example. Huang Liang suddenly shot into the sky and rushed forward. His voice traveled from afar. I'm going to receive them. Young friend, please be prepared. After being treated by the fairy doctor for several days, his injuries were no longer serious. He had not left before because he had developed a strong interest in Lu Yi and wanted to stay here to observe him. Secondly, the allied army was so powerful that eliminating the Heavenly Gully cult would not be a problem. There was no need for him to take action. But now that the allied army was being hunted down, he could at least be of some use if he went to receive them. This is clearly a medicinal valley that can save the lives of the living, but it's about to become a land of bloody slaughter. The fairy doctor sighed softly, and her towering chest heaved violently. Even though Lu Yi was looking straight ahead, he caught this obvious movement from the corner of his eye. Saving people is saving yourself. Killing enemies is also saving people. Lu Yi replied casually. I'll have to ask you to bring your apprentices and Lu Li to hide temporarily. The fairy doctor nodded. I'll have to trouble you from now on. She turned around and walked inside. However, after taking a few steps, she suddenly paused and said, Do you know? The Dragon Emperor is actually divided into two parts. Lu Yi turned to look at her in confusion. One is the Dragon King armor, which is the part in your hand. The other is the Dragon Spine Blade. The Dragon Spine Blade appeared 2,000 years ago and was obtained by someone. However, that blade seemed to have a spirit and was abnormally fierce. It has been suppressed in a top-tier faction. For many years, that faction has been trying to find a way to neutralize the fierce nature of the Dragon Spine Blade. Unfortunately, the results have been minimal. The only factions that the fairy doctor could call a faction were the three overlord sections. The three overlord sects seemed to have corresponding methods to neutralize the fierce nature of the blade. The Howren Academy had the righteous Qi, the Titanium Temple had the Buddhist chanting, and the Imperial Heavenly Sect had mysterious secret techniques. As for which faction it was, Lu Yi did not know. Previously, when Huang Liang told him about the Dragon Emperor, he did not mention anything about the Dragon King armor or the Dragon Spine Blade. This led him to think that the so-called Dragon Emperor was the thing in his hand. Now that Lu Yi thought about it, Huang Liang did seem to want to continue when he spoke. There was a sentence that he didn't finish halfway, which made Lu Yi very unhappy. From the looks of it, Huang Liang was hiding the Dragon Spine Saber. From his standpoint, it was natural for him to hide something from Lu Yi. Since ancient times, every time the Dragon Emperor appeared, the entire dragon-soaring realm would be bathed in blood. There would be no peace. Before knowing Lu Yi's temperament, Huang Liang naturally did not dare to tell him everything. If Lu Yi was restless and wanted to find the Dragon Spine Blade with the Dragon King armor, it would be troublesome. The Titanium Temple. This inexplicable thought suddenly appeared in Lu Yi's mind. The Dragon Spine Blade was very likely to be suppressed in the Titanium Temple. This was because compared to the methods of the Howren Academy and the Imperial Heavenly Sect, the Buddhist chanting of the Titanium Temple focused more on dispelling and not suppressing. What do you mean by telling me this? Lu Yi narrowed his eyes and looked at the fairy doctor. This woman did not mention this before and only told him after Huang Liang left. It seemed like she did it on purpose. The fairy doctor said, I don't mean anything else. It's just that I see that you use a blade. The Dragon Emperor has the Dragon Spine Blade. Perhaps this time, the Dragon Emperor has a true master. She walked into Yi Lioli's room and carried her out. She called for a few of her apprentices, and then, under Yi's guidance, they hid inside a protective array. In the Medicine Valley, only Lu Yi was left standing alone. Hoopa crouched on his shoulder, his eyes bright and full of expression as he looked into the distance. After he settled the fairy doctor and the others down, she quickly returned and went underground to prepare for battle. the wind and clouds were bleak. Until a certain moment, Lu Yi, who was deep in thought, was awakened by Hu Po's roar. He looked up and saw that at the end of his vision, a large number of flowing lights were rushing in his direction. Behind the flowing lights, there were streaks of blood-red light across the sky. Those who were being hunted, they were all here. 7017K. Chapter 719. The soaring dragon realm was not as vast as the 9 states, but there were many forces of different sizes. A total of 984 sects had participated in the attack on the Heaven Canyon sect. Tens of thousands of cultivators had gathered, led by the 3 overlord sections. However, more than half of them had been killed in the battle below the canyon. Those who were still alive were fleeing like stray dogs. The Blood Tribe cultivators and the remaining members of the Heaven Canyon sect who had joined the Blood Tribe were in hot pursuit. In Lu Ye's field of vision, colorful lights were rushing toward the Medicine Valley. They arrived in front of him in an instant. Is that 6th Yi? The leader was a man in a long robe and a silk headscarf. He looked like a scholar at first glance. He was the current dean of the Howren Academy, Yuan Changsun. He had already heard about the situation in the Medicine Valley from Huang Liang, so he naturally knew about Lu Ye's existence. He also knew that the Alliance army had to rely on Lu Ye's strength if they wanted to survive. The reason he came here first was to communicate with Lu Yi. That's right, Lu Yi replied. As he spoke, Yuan Changsun had already arrived in front of Lu Yi. He sized him up and saw that Lu Ye's expression was calm, as if he could remain calm even if a mountain collapsed in front of him. Yuan Changsun secretly praised him and sighed in his heart. He had heard of the domineering saber mountain villa. Yi Ying's domineering saber technique was quite famous in the soaring dragon realm. However, he did not expect Yi Ying's 6th son to be so capable. According to some of the information that Huang Liang had passed on to him, Ying was also very important and faintly thought of him as the savior of the world. Yuan Changsun did not care whether Yi Ying was the savior of the world or not. Only those who could survive today would have the right to talk about their future. I'll have to trouble you next. Yuan Changsun nodded slightly at Lu Yi. Let them enter the valley. Yuan Changsun immediately turned around and shouted, Quickly enter the valley. As soon as he finished speaking, streaks of light flew past the two of them and rushed into the Medicine Valley, merging into the colorful flowers in the valley. Most of the cultivators didn't know about the mysteries of the Medicine Valley. They had witnessed the changes under the ravine with their own eyes and witnessed the treachery and power of the blood race. At this moment, they were all uneasy. Even if they entered the Medicine Valley, they didn't feel too safe. However, all the cultivators had already received the news that the Medicine Valley was enveloped by a shocking formation. This was their last hope. Whether they could escape this calamity depended on the outcome of the upcoming battle. Little friend, go ahead and get ready. I'll bring up the rear, Yuan Changsun said while holding the long sword in his hand. Lu Yi nodded, turned around, and retreated into the valley. As they fled, more and more cultivators were killed by the Blood Tribe and the remnants of the Heavenly Gorge sect. Corpses fell to the ground and blood splattered everywhere. Fortunately, the Allied army had a large number of people. Although the vampires were strong, it wasn't that easy to wipe them out. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, all of the fleeing soaring dragon cultivators had entered the valley. More than half of the pursuing Blood Tribe and Heavenly Gorge sect members had also entered the valley. In an instant, fights broke out everywhere in the valley filled with birds and fragrant flowers. Only after all of the Blood Tribe members had entered the valley did Lu Yi channel his spiritual power into the formation jade pendant in his hand. In an instant, the clouds and mist in the valley churned. An extremely dense sea of fog appeared out of nowhere, enveloping the entire valley in an airtight mist. There's a formation. Only now did the Blood Tribe members realize something was amiss. Cries of surprise rang out. Many of the Blood Tribe members instinctively soared into the sky, trying to escape the range of the formation. However, they had only flown a few feet into the air when they felt as if a huge mountain was crashing down from above, preventing them from flying any higher. Flight restriction formation. Many of the aggressive Blood Tribe members were finally shocked. They had never imagined that a place like the Soaring Dragon Realm would have something like a flight restriction formation. They were shrouded in fog, unable to determine their direction, and unable to fly into the sky. They had become the trapped party. At the same time, the Soaring Dragon cultivators were also at a loss as to what to do. This was because the enemies before them had suddenly been enveloped by thick fog, and they couldn't see any trace of them. The surrounding scenery had also completely disappeared, and the many sounds of fighting had also fallen silent. It was as if they were the only ones left between heaven and earth. In the fog, Lu Yichuan gasped for breath. In the previous battle, many of his fellow disciples had died. He was lucky enough to escape, but he was also injured. When he fought with a Blood Tribe member just now, he almost died at the other party's hands. The Soaring Dragon Realm had never dealt with the Blood Tribe, so they were completely unaware of their methods. This was also part of the reason why they were defeated under the Heavenly Ravine. The Blood Tribe's many secret techniques were extremely strange, and their blood was very corrosive. Whether it was the spirituality of spirit weapons or protective spiritual power, the blood could corrode them. Therefore, in the process of fighting with the Blood Tribe, many Soaring Dragon cultivators were at a disadvantage because of this. As the fog churned, the enemy in front of them suddenly disappeared. Everything around them disappeared, leaving only the thick sea of fog floating around them. Lu Yichuan gasped for breath. Just as he was at a loss, the sea of fog in front of him suddenly rolled to both sides, revealing a 5-foot-wide passage. The passage was only a few feet long, and at the end of the passage, a blood-colored figure was spinning around like a headless fly. It was the Blood Tribe member who had almost killed him. Lu Yichuan's heart tightened, and he almost instinctively wanted to escape, but he quickly realized that the Blood Tribe member's condition was not quite right. He had already discovered him, so logically speaking, he should have discovered him as well. But in fact, this Blood Tribe member seemed to have been affected by something, and did not notice him at all. Someone was helping him in the dark. Lu Yichuan immediately reacted. This kind of method could only be used by the master of the formation. He clenched the spirit weapon in his hand and quietly approached the Blood Tribe member. When he was close, his spiritual power suddenly exploded, and he fiercely attacked the Blood Tribe member. Die! Only when Lu Yichuan suddenly attacked and his sharp aura approached did the Blood Tribe member suddenly react. However, it was already too late. As Lu Yichuan waved the spirit weapon in his hand, the blood shield on the Blood Tribe member's body shook violently. The powerful force hit the Blood Tribe member until he vomited blood, and his aura withered a lot. Originally, Lu Yichuan was not the Blood Tribe member's match, but now that he was seriously injured, the situation was immediately reversed. Lu Yichuan fought with the anger in his heart and used all the skills he had learned in his life to beat the Blood Tribe member until he could not resist at all. In just a moment, the Blood Tribe member was killed. In another part of the valley, within the mist, Pu Peng was locked in an endless battle with a Blood Clan member. The great monks of the Vajra Temple were indeed physically strong, and their vitality was also extremely vigorous. However, their bodies, which had never failed before, were of little use against a Blood Clan member. The Blood Tribe member's physique was not strong, but their chi and blood power was extremely strange and contained an extremely strong corrosive power. Pu Peng's powerful physical body, which had been tempered for decades, was now full of traces of corrosion, and even his golden shield was broken. Monk Pu Peng was very strong, but the Blood Tribe member he was fighting was not weak either. If there were no accidents, Pu Peng would definitely not be a match for him. In fact, if Pu Peng had not used the sound of Buddhist chants from time to time to shake the enemy's mind, he would have been dead long ago. Just as the two figures were fighting, there was a sudden muffled sound of thunder. A scorching white thunderbolt as thick as a baby's arm fell from the sky and coincidentally struck the Blood Tribe member's head. The tyrannical Blood Tribe member instantly trembled all over. Fine electric snakes swam on the surface of his body, and his aura weakened by a lot. This is a good chance. Monk Pu Peng's eyes lit up. He leaned forward and punched the Blood Tribe member who seemed to be unable to move. The power of this punch was enough to shatter gold and break stone. It landed heavily on the Blood Clan member's chest. The Blood Clan member's chest caved in at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the back of his shirt exploded, revealing a circular hole. The back of his heart also swelled up for a moment. Ah! The Blood Tribe member spat out blood, but the blood mist that he spat out seemed to have a mind of its own as it enveloped monk Pu Peng. Pu Peng had suffered such a loss before, so how could he not be prepared? The spiritual power around his body shook, and the blood mist was blown away. He punched 3 more times and directly killed the Blood Tribe member in front of him on the spot. In the mountain valley, people like Lu Yichuan and monk Pu Peng were everywhere. The spirit array of the Medicine Valley could be said to be the most powerful creation Lu Yi had ever made since he started cultivating. Previously, when the Heavenly Gorge sect's pursuers were trapped in the spirit array, Lu Yi killed several Ninth Order elders by himself. Huang Liang found it hard to believe. But at that time, Lu Yi couldn't fully activate the power of the spirit array here because no one cooperated with him. If he wanted to truly exert the power of the spirit array here, he had to do it like this. He hid in the dark, controlled the power of the spirit array, and cooperated with the others who entered the spirit array to kill the enemies. However, this consumed a lot of his spiritual power because there were too many cultivators who entered the Mountain Valley's spirit array this time. In addition to the Blood Tribe members who chased after them, there were more than tens of thousands of living beings fighting in the entire Medicine Valley. No matter how powerful his spiritual power was, he couldn't control all the positions. He could only try his best to cooperate with the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm to save some people who should have died. He also helped the cultivators who were at a disadvantage turn defeat into victory, turning the situation around bit by bit. The power of one's spiritual power was directly linked to the strength of one's soul. If Lu Ye's soul was strong, his spiritual power would naturally be strong as well. As time passed, the power of his spiritual power continued to be consumed. When Lu Yi felt tired, he decisively took out soul water and swallowed it to replenish himself. He and Hoopa shuttled through the spirit array. Under his guidance, they accurately found the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators who were seriously injured and dying. Then, they sent them to the little fairy doctor for treatment. In this way, many lives were saved. However, there was only one little fairy doctor. Even if the medicine apprentices under her were extremely good medical cultivators, they could only play a limited role in such a situation. More and more cultivators died from their injuries. The entire Medicine Valley was filled with blood and corpses were strewn everywhere. This was no longer a simple battle between cultivators. This was a confrontation between two worlds. This was war. Facing the strong invasion of the Blood Tribe, the Soaring Dragon Realm couldn't retreat. There was no way out. Chapter 720. While controlling the formation to assist the Soaring Dragon cultivators in killing their enemies, Lu Yi was also observing the blood breeds. Like the Soaring Dragon cultivators, this was his first time coming into contact with such a peculiar race. Naturally, he had to take the opportunity to observe them. No matter what, this was an invader's territory, and there would be conflicts in the future. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. The blood breeds were generally taller and more slender than humans. Their most obvious feature was the blood-red glow on their exposed skin and a pair of pointed ears. Their blood was extremely corrosive. This was probably not because of the cultivation technique they cultivated, because every blood breed had such a characteristic. This was probably an innate ability of their race. And this ability was undoubtedly very troublesome for cultivators. Lu Yi saw with his own eyes that the protective spiritual power of cultivators was eroded and destroyed, and then killed. He also saw many cultivators' spirit tools being eroded and losing their spirituality, causing them to lose their battle power. The insect race did not have intelligence, and they only brought destruction and slaughter. In comparison, the blood breed's racial talents seemed to be specially born to restrain cultivators. Moreover, these blood breeds were proficient in some secret blood techniques, and when they were used, they were extremely strange and impossible to guard against. This race was indeed powerful, but its weakness seemed to be very obvious. The Buddhist chanting of the monks of the Titanium Temple had a great impact on their minds, so the blood breeds often did not have the upper hand in their battles with those monks. Another point was that lightning techniques seemed to be very harmful to these blood breeds. Not to mention the miraculous effects of the many lightning summoning arrays that he had set up in the valley, there were many spell cultivators in the Soaring Dragon realm who had cultivated lightning spells. When these spells were released, the blood breeds who were attacked would often suffer great injuries. Next should be fire techniques. Although they did not have the same restraining effect as lightning techniques, they were also very harmful to the blood breeds. This was undoubtedly very valuable information, and could provide some help to the Soaring Dragon realm in the future against the blood breeds. However, what Lu Yi was most concerned about was the dozen or so blood breeds who had barged into the valley, and they seemed to be exceptionally strong. The power they displayed was indeed at the peak of the Cloud River tier, but their foundation did not seem to be something that a Cloud River tier cultivator could possess. So even with Lu Ye's secret help, they did not have a good ending against these blood breeds. Lu Yi could only activate the array to trap them, not giving them a chance to come into contact with the Soaring Dragon cultivators. There was something very wrong with these vampires. This sort of feeling caused him to be unable to help but recall the scene of his eldest senior sister, Wei Yang, slaughtering everyone at the top of the Golden Light. That day, Wei Yang, with her true Lake Realm 9th Order cultivation, had forcefully charged into the Spirit Stream battlefield. Although she could only display the strength of a peak Spirit Stream realm cultivator under the balance of the Heavenly Array, she still had a true Lake Realm foundation, so no one was her opponent. At this point, Lu Yi suddenly understood. The blood tribe cultivators that caught his attention were indeed not at the Cloud River tier. It was extremely likely that they were at the true lake tier. However, the Soaring Dragon realm was no longer capable of supporting the cultivators above the Cloud River. Therefore, after they entered this realm, they could only display the power of the peak of the Cloud River. In other words, the entire Soaring Dragon realm was suppressing their strength. If it weren't for that, the cultivator allied army would have been wiped out long ago. This was both good news and bad news. Even if they could only unleash power at the peak stage of the Cloud River tier, their foundation was still there, and ordinary Cloud River tier cultivators would definitely not be able to contend against them. If these blood tribe cultivators were already so powerful, then what about Xuexiao? From all the signs, the blood tribe invading the Soaring Dragon realm this time was led by Xuexiao. Naturally, he was the strongest. Just as Lu Yi was thinking, he suddenly caught a glimpse of the dozen or so powerful blood tribe cultivators acting strangely at the same time. He didn't know what kind of technique they used, but the dozen or so of them actually exploded at the same time, turning into flowing pools of blood. Immediately after, as if they had received some kind of guidance, the dozen or so pools of blood actually drew each other closer. Lu Yi immediately understood that the dozen or so powerful blood tribe cultivators had sensed that something was wrong and didn't hesitate to activate some powerful secret technique to escape. Naturally, he wouldn't sit and watch such a thing happen. He immediately activated the power of the Great Array, wanting to isolate the dozen or so pools of blood, and at the same time, activate the power of the various killing arrays. Explosions sounded, and the sea of fog rolled more and more violently. However, no matter what Lu Yi did, he couldn't stop the dozen or so pools of blood from gathering. They seemed to be able to sense each other's position within the layers of great arrays. What kind of mysterious technique was this? In a short while, the dozen or so pools of blood gathered in one place, turning into a sinister wriggling blood dragon. The blood dragon swept in all directions, shuttling back and forth within the great array of the valley. Even if Lu Yi activated the power of many killing arrays, it was still difficult to resist. Wherever the blood dragon passed, flowers and plants withered, and life dissipated. Some Soaring Dragon cultivators who couldn't dodge in time were wrapped in it and died without even making a sound. What made Lu Yi feel fortunate was that this secret technique seemed to be only available to the dozen or so strongest blood tribe cultivators. The other blood tribe cultivators didn't have this ability. However, the blood dragon was tyrannical. One by one, the trapped Blood Tribe cultivators were rescued and disappeared into the Blood Dragon. As the Blood Tribe cultivators merged into it, the Blood Dragon's size gradually expanded. Lu Ye's expression became serious. He didn't expect the Blood Tribe to have such a response. In his original plan, he could actually catch all the Blood Tribe cultivators who broke into the valley in one fell swoop. Now, looking at the winding Blood Dragon in the Medicine Valley, Lu Yi knew in his heart that he couldn't stop them with his own strength. However, no matter what this secret technique was, it must be extremely harmful to the Blood Tribe. Otherwise, they wouldn't have waited until now to use it. After making a choice in his heart, Lu Yi sighed helplessly. With a wave of his hand, the sea of fog in the valley churned endlessly. In front of the Blood Dragon, the sea of fog took the initiative to part, revealing a passage that led directly to the outside of the valley. Lu Yi could force the Blood Dragon to stay, but in this way, who knew how many more soaring dragon cultivators would die? The other party had already put on a stance of not giving up until one of them died. If Lu Yi wanted to save the lives of the soaring dragon cultivators, he could only let them go. The Blood Dragon obviously sensed Lu Ye's thoughts, so when the passage in the sea of fog appeared, it rushed out without hesitation. Along the way, it saved many Blood Tribe cultivators. It wasn't until it rushed out of the Medicine Valley that it let out an extremely angry and unwilling roar, shaking its head and wagging its tail as it quickly left. A moment later, a few hundred miles away, the sinister Blood Dragon suddenly collapsed. Balls of blood squirmed and transformed, revealing the figures of the Blood Tribe cultivators. However, not all the Blood Tribe cultivators who had merged with the Blood Dragon escaped. Some Blood Tribe cultivators had completely turned into blood, and there was no way for them to recover to their original state. Even those Blood Tribe cultivators who had recovered to their original state all looked like their vitality had been greatly damaged. Their originally blood-red skin had become much dimmer. Lu Ye's guess was right. Although this racial secret technique that belonged exclusively to the Blood Tribe was powerful, the backlash was also extremely fierce. Unless it was absolutely necessary, the Blood Tribe definitely wouldn't use this secret technique. About 1,000 people in this group of Blood Tribe cultivators had escaped from the Medicine Valley, but now only about 700 were still alive. The leader of the Blood Tribe, who looked somewhat old, turned back to look in the direction of the Medicine Valley. There was still some lingering fear in his eyes. I didn't think that this realm would actually have such a powerful formation. Another Blood Tribe cultivator who looked like a woman clutched her chest and said, "After all, there were divine ocean tier cultivators. Even after 800 years of absorption, and the volume of heaven and earth has faded, there are still records of higher-level mysteries." The old Blood Tribe cultivator shook his head and said, "Even so, there shouldn't be such a large formation. This is definitely not something that a Cloud River tier cultivator can set up. There's no point in saying more. Let's go back and report first. I hope Lord Blood Owl won't be too angry." At the mention of Blood Owl, the group of Blood Tribe cultivators all shuddered. Even to them, Blood Owl was an extremely frightening existence. In the Medicine Valley, the strongest group of Blood Tribe cultivators had escaped. The pressure on Lu Yi was greatly reduced, and he could concentrate more on controlling the power of the large formation. And with his help and cooperation, the cultivators of Soaring Dragon also became brazen and fearless. One after another, Blood Tribe cultivators were killed, and blood gathered into a river. Until half a day later, when the sea of fog that shrouded the Medicine Valley dissipated, all the cultivators of Soaring Dragon who were still alive looked around. In their field of vision, the whole Medicine Valley had been dyed red. Numerous corpses of humans and Blood Tribe cultivators were strewn across the ground, and the number of cultivators who were still standing was obviously much lower than when they had escaped into the Medicine Valley. However, what was comforting was that those who were still alive were all human cultivators. They had won. It was originally a situation of certain death, but after escaping into this valley, there was a shocking reversal. How could the cultivators not know that it was the function of the large formation here that allowed them to survive and kill their enemies? It was all the credit of the person who had set up the large formation. Many pairs of eyes looked towards the center of the valley, where Lu Ye's figure slowly descended with a pale face a few feet above the ground. Huang Liang hurriedly rushed over and asked with concern, "Little friend, are you all right?" After this battle, he was more certain than ever that Lu Yi was the savior who had carried all the fortune of heaven and earth. Therefore, after the battle ended, the first thing he did was to look for Lu Ye's figure, fearing that something bad had happened to him. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. "It's just that I've consumed a lot of energy. Little friend, rest first. This old man will take care of the rest." Lu Yi nodded and said, "I've captured a group of blood tribe cultivators and imprisoned them in a formation. Sect Master Huang, please take good care of them and don't let them escape." As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed, revealing a large concealment formation. There were 7 or 8 blood tribe cultivators trapped inside, but these blood tribe cultivators had obviously suffered heavy injuries and were all dispirited and listless. With the formation enveloping them, they couldn't escape at all. If he wanted to gather information about the blood tribe, he naturally had to start with the blood tribe themselves. In the later stages of this battle, Lu Yi was already able to free himself, so he captured some blood tribe cultivators alive. As for what information he could obtain from these blood tribe cultivators, that would depend on his methods. At the very least, he had to understand what was going on with Tianhe and the blood tribe's foundation. Only then could he target them. 7017K. Chapter 721. The Medicine Valley had never been as lively as it was today. Cultivators shuttled back and forth in a hurry. After the battlefield needed to be cleaned up. It would have been fine if it had been some desolate wilderness, but this was the Medicinal Valley after all. Furthermore, there was a world-shaking great formation set up here. No one knew if the blood breeds would invade a second time. Thus, before the blood breeds made a comeback, the cultivators of Soaring Dragon were all contributing their strength. One by one, the corpses were carried out and buried. Those with light injuries took the initiative to take care of those with serious injuries. The fairy doctor and her medical apprentices were already so busy that they could stomp their feet on the back of their heads. Fortunately, when the Cultivator Alliance went to attack the Heaven Canyon sect this time, there were many medical cultivators accompanying them. This greatly reduced the pressure on her. Some cultivators sat on the ground in a daze, resting. Their expressions were empty. This day's experience was like a dream to many ordinary cultivators. Originally, it was just an internal problem of the Cultivator Alliance attacking the Heaven Canyon sect. However, somehow, it developed into an external war against the blood breeds. Outsiders invading the realm. No one would dare to believe such a thing if they didn't experience it for themselves. And the way in which the enemies invaded was actually the huge Heaven Canyon that had appeared in the Dragon Soaring realm 800 years ago. If it weren't for the shocking formation in the Medicine Valley today, the entire Cultivator Alliance would have been slaughtered. And once this batch of elites was slaughtered, the Dragon Soaring realm would no longer have any power to resist the blood breeds. They would be at their mercy. Although the Dragon Soaring realm had suffered heavy losses, they still retained a group of main forces and had the capital to fight against the blood breeds. The news quickly spread through the entire realm through the Medicine Valley. Everyone who received the news couldn't believe it. However, as more and more people received the same news, and the 3 overlord sects jointly announced it to the world, this unbelievable thing became reality. In just half a day, the news of the blood breeds invading the Dragon Soaring realm spread to the most remote corners. People were terrified. Regardless of whether they were cultivators or mortals, they were all at a loss. There were also many rumors, mixed with some talk of the end of the world. Those who committed crimes became more and more indulgent. For a time, the Soaring Dragon domain was in a precarious situation. External troubles had not been eliminated, internal troubles were frequent. The entire domain was in a state of turmoil. Amidst the turbulent times, the 3 overlord sects stood out once again. On one hand, they joined forces with the various sects of all sizes, using thunderous methods to eliminate all kinds of internal problems. On the other hand, They called upon the Dragon Ascension Realm's Cultivation World to mobilize their troops north to fight against the blood breeds together. When the nest is overturned, no egg can remain intact. Every cultivator who has been able to cultivate successfully knows this principle. Therefore, when the three overlord sects called for reinforcements, cultivators from all over the world responded. In less than 2 days, a large number of cultivators set off from all over the Soaring Dragon sect and rushed towards the north. Many sects were emptied overnight. Regardless of their age, they all headed north. In such a precarious situation, the cultivation world of Long Ting displayed unimaginable mobility and unity. It had to be said that this was a blessing. In the Medicine Valley, Lu Yi was accompanied by a group of array formation cultivators. Regardless of whether they were older or older than him, they were all respectful to him. In the cultivation world, strength was respected. In the group of array cultivators, whoever had the highest attainments in array Dao would naturally be respected. These array formation cultivators who followed Lu Yi had personally experienced the powerful might of the Medicine Valley's array. They knew in their hearts that it was impossible for them to set up such an array in their lifetime. Now that they were facing the master who set up this array, how could they not be respectful? At this moment, Lu Yi was not teaching them about array Dao. Instead, he was instructing them on how to control the Medicine Valley's array. After the previous battle, Lu Yi had noticed a problem. When he was setting up the Medicine Valley's array, he did not think too much. He was simply applying what he had learned. This caused the Medicine Valley's array to be exceptionally large and complicated. Therefore, the problem was obvious. With his strength alone, he could not perfectly control the array. Otherwise, so many Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators would not have died in the battle in the Medicine Valley. If he could perfectly control the array's power, not a single Soaring Dragon Realm cultivator would have died. On the contrary, none of the blood breeds who broke in would have been able to escape. To solve this problem, one way was to raise his strength far beyond his current level. At the very least, he had to reach the true lake realm. Another way was to borrow the help of others. For example, the native array cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm. Let each of them be in charge of an area, and then he would be the central controller. In this way, although he still could not fully exert the array's power due to the need for coordination, it should not be a problem to exert 70 to 80% of the array's power. The Soaring Dragon Realm had no idea about the situation with the blood breeds. Although they had repelled them once, no one knew if they would come back again. Therefore, the Medicine Valley had to be prepared for another battle at all times. Also, there were already more cultivators rushing over from all over the Soaring Dragon Realm. When the time came, the Medicine Valley would definitely become the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators' camp. It would also be the front line for the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators to fight against the blood breeds. Naturally, the more secure it was, the better. One by one, the array cultivators followed Lu Ye's footsteps. As they continued to understand the Medicine Valley's array, their reverence for Lu Yi deepened. Everyone's hearts were surging with shock. They could not imagine how a young man who was not even 20 years old and whose cultivation was only at the 6th order Cloud River realm could have such profound attainments in array Dao. He was more than a few streets ahead of these old array masters who had been famous for a long time. It was not until the last area was properly set up and the array cultivators were left behind that Lu Yi walked back leisurely. "Sixth brother." In front of the straw hut, Yi Lioli greeted him. The little girl's face was a little pale, and her whole body was wrapped in a blood qi visible to the naked eye. The feeling this blood qi gave off was very similar to the aura of the blood breeds. "Why did you run out? Didn't the little fairy doctor want you to rest more?" Lu Yi raised his hand and patted her head, glancing at Yi who was standing beside Yi Lioli. Yi shook her head, looking like she had to come out no matter what. Yi Lioli enjoyed her sixth brother's doting behavior, and a smile bloomed on her face. "It's so boring staying in the house all the time." She held Lu Ye's arm, just like when she was young, not caring that she had grown up. Her eyes curved into crescents. "And sixth brother has become a great hero." During the battle in the Medicine Valley, she was still in a coma. After waking up, she learned about the battle from Yi. She never thought that her sixth brother would become the key figure in saving the soaring dragon army. She couldn't believe it at first, but after walking out of the straw hut and seeing the cultivators coming and going, she believed it. For a moment, she felt proud. If father, mother, and brothers knew about this in the underworld, they would definitely be very happy. Yi Lioli smiled even more happily. After the incident at the domineering Saber Mountain Villa, the little girl rarely smiled. Only now did she feel happy from the bottom of her heart. There's no great hero, it's just a coincidence. When he was setting up the array in the Medicine Valley, he didn't expect it to have such an effect. The reason he came to the Medicine Valley was to bring Yi Lioli to seek medical treatment. Everything that happened after that was a coincidence, but also a guide from the unseen world. I don't care, sixth brother is a great hero. Yi Lioli turned to look at Yi. Sister-in-law, don't you think so? He didn't correct her anymore. She pursed her lips and smiled. Yes, your sixth brother is the greatest hero. All right, you should go in. If Senior Fairy Doctor knows about this, she'll scold you again. Yi Lioli reluctantly let go of Lu Ye's arm and followed Yi back into the straw hut. After the two girls left, a few figures who had been waiting by the side flashed over. They were Huang Liang, Yuan Changzuan, and Master Guangjing. Yuan Changzuan and Guangjing had already been introduced to Lu Yi by Huang Liang. Young friend. Huang Liang bowed. Thank you for your hard work. He knew what it meant to have an array master share the array he had set up without any reservations. It was equivalent to opening up one's attainments in Array Dao to other array masters to study and learn without holding anything back. Although the sectarian bias in the dragon soaring realm wasn't very serious, it was rare to see someone so broad-minded, especially when Lu Yi was a young man who wasn't even 20 years old. With those formation masters in charge of each area, the defense of the Medicine Valley would only be stronger. Even if the blood breeds came back, this place would have the capital to resist. It's Soaring Dragon's fortune to have you, young friend. Guangjing placed a palm in front of his chest and bowed slightly. Yuan Changzuan also said, Cultivator, ye should be able to rest in peace knowing that the domineering Saber Mountain Villa has someone like you. If Soaring Dragon can survive this disaster, Howren Academy is willing to help you rebuild the domineering Saber Mountain Villa. Howren Academy will do whatever you ask. The Medicine Valley's array alone wasn't enough for Yuan Changzuan to value Lu Yi so much. However, Huang Liang had been instilling in him and Master Guangjing the idea that Lu Yi was the savior of the world. The two couldn't help but believe it. Huang Liang and Master Guangjing also expressed their willingness to help Lu Yi rebuild the domineering Saber Mountain Villa. Lu Yi shook his head and said, The domineering Saber Mountain Villa has been destroyed. There won't be another one in the future. My sister and I have no intention of rebuilding the mountain villa. I appreciate your kindness. After a pause, Lu Yi suddenly said, Oh right, Academy Master Yuan is a sword cultivator, right? Yuan Changzuan nodded. When Academy Master killed the enemy in the array, the sword technique you used was very impressive. It was an eye-opener. Yuan Changzuan chuckled. That was Howren Academy's book sword technique. If you're interested, I'll have someone send you a copy later for you to take a look. How could he not understand the meaning behind Lu Ye's words? Although he found it strange that Lu Yi, who used a saber, would be interested in sword Dao, Lu Yi could let many formation cultivators comprehend the mysteries of the array. He was broad-minded. How could he, the Academy Master of Howren Academy, be inferior to a young man? In the face of such a great disaster, some of the previous rules of not imparting secret manuals to outsiders didn't need to be followed. If they couldn't survive this great disaster, Howren Academy wouldn't exist anymore. What was the use of secret manuals? In that case, thank you very much, Academy Master. Yuan Changzuan was surprisingly easy to talk to, which saved him a lot of effort. He naturally didn't want the book sword technique for himself to cultivate. He used a saber, so the book sword technique was useless to him. However, fourth senior brother was a sword cultivator, so this thing might be useful to him. 7017K. Chapter 722. Seniors, You're looking for me because of the captured blood breeds, right? Lu Yi asked. Huang Liang nodded with a serious expression. The blood breeds at Sky Gully haven't made any moves in the past 2 days, but the more it's like this, the more uneasy I feel. Although this was the first time they came into contact with the blood breeds, they were not a good race just from the fact that they would invade other people's realms. After suffering such a huge loss at the Medicine Valley, Huang Liang and the others had been worried that the blood breeds would make a comeback. But in fact, 2 days had passed, and there was no movement from the blood breeds. There must be a reason for this abnormality, so Huang Liang and the others had been monitoring Sky Gully for the past few days. But in the face of such an unfamiliar enemy, there was not much information that could be obtained through simple surveillance. The best way was naturally to start from the blood breeds themselves. The few blood breeds that Lu Yi had captured earlier would undoubtedly play a crucial role. As long as they could pry open their mouths, they would be able to obtain a lot of information about the blood breeds. Since they were captured by Lu Yi, they naturally had to come and greet Lu Yi. Seniors, please do as you wish. My original intention of capturing them was for this moment. Thank you very much, young friend. Huang Liang was excited. But seniors, please allow me to listen in. Lu Yi was also very interested in the blood breeds. It was the first time they had come into contact with this race, so no one knew more than the other. Of course, Huang Liang made the decision. A moment later, Lu Yi and the other 3 arrived at the trap formation that imprisoned the captured blood breeds. Although 2 days had passed, these blood breeds were still extremely weak, and there were dragon soaring cultivators guarding nearby. They had no hope of escaping at all. Seeing Lu Yi and the others, the captured blood breeds immediately became vigilant. For the past 2 days, they had only been imprisoned here, and no one had come to pay attention to them. Now that people suddenly came, it was obvious that they were going to make a move. As prisoners, the Blood Clan members had already anticipated the worst possible outcome. Standing outside the trap formation, Huang Liang glanced at these blood breeds and said, I'm Huang Liang, the sect master of the Dragon Soaring Realm's Imperial Heavenly Sect. I'd like to inquire about some things. Who is willing to speak? Some blood breeds spat at Huang Liang from across the formation, and some sneered. There were even some grumpy ones shouted, You want to inquire about the blood breeds? Wishful thinking. Kill us if you can. Although these vampires were all extremely weak, they appeared to be abnormally fierce and unyielding. Huang Liang was not surprised by this situation. Without saying a word, he signaled to the side with his eyes. Immediately, the soaring dragon cultivators guarding this place rushed into the trapping array and directly pulled out the Blood Clan who had shouted the most fiercely just now. After exiting the trapping formation, the seemingly weak Blood Clan member suddenly launched an attack, wanting to break free from his bindings. However, the soaring dragon cultivator who captured him was not weak either. He had long since made preparations, so how could he possibly let him succeed? With a few punches and kicks, the Blood Clan member was beaten to the ground. Within the trapping formation, the other vampires' eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. They shouted incessantly, but no one paid them any attention. Huang Liang put his hands behind his back and looked down at the Blood Clan member in front of him. How should I address you? Although he did not know how to interrogate, he was still experienced enough to know that this was not the time to rush things. Therefore, he did not ask for information about the Blood Kindred and the Blood World. Instead, he tried to think of a way to make the Blood Kindred talk. As long as he could make the other party talk, there would be hope for the rest. Call me Grandpa. The Blood Clan member raised his head. His eyes were filled with blood-red light as he glared fiercely at Huang Liang. Although his breath was weak, his aura was extremely fierce. Huang Liang nodded slightly. He did not waste any more words with him. He only lifted a finger and pointed it at his forehead. On the fingertip, there was a faint flash of lightning. A trace of fear and horror flashed across the fierce Blood Clan member's eyes. The thunder technique had a strong restraining effect on the Blood Clan. This was already known to the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm. No matter what, the battle in the Medicine Valley previously gave the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm some basic understanding of the Blood Clan. Seeing that Huang Liang's finger was approaching, the Blood Clan member still wanted to resist. However, with such a weak body, how could he resist? The fingertip pointed at the Blood Clan member's forehead. In an instant, lightning surged and enveloped the Blood Clan member. A crackling sound was heard as the lightning snake wandered around the Blood Clan member's body. The Blood Clan member immediately seemed to be suffering from extreme torture and pain. He screamed at the top of his lungs. "Excellent, excellent!" Monk Guangjing lowered his eyes. He played with a string of Buddhist prayer beads in his hand and chanted some scripture. The lightning suddenly disappeared. The tortured Blood Clan member seemed to have broken all his bones. He fell to the ground softly. "How should I address you?" Huang Liang asked lightly. "Grandpa." The Blood Clan member gritted his teeth as he enunciated each word clearly. Huang Liang pointed his finger at him again, and lightning surged once more. After a while, he stopped and asked the same question. After more than 10 times, the already weak Blood Clan member no longer had any signs of life. He had been tortured to death. However, even in death, he did not obey Huang Liang's will. The toughness of his bones was beyond imagination. The cultivators of the Soaring Dragon realm who were guarding the place felt chills down their spines. They secretly thought that if they were in his shoes, they might not have the courage of the Blood Clan member. They might even confess under such torture. This had nothing to do with morality or fear of death. When the torture exceeded one's limits, one's willpower would collapse. Huang Liang did not care that a Blood Clan member was tortured to death. From the beginning to the end, his expression was as calm as water. He gave the Blood Clan a feeling that this person kills people like scything flax and has a vicious nature. However, in reality, Huang Liang had never done such a thing in his life. In the past, no matter how evil the people he met were, he would just kill them. He would not torture them at all. However, the Blood Clan was related to the future of the Soaring Dragon realm. Therefore, even if he did not like it, even if he had never done it before, he had to adapt. He could not show any flaws on his face. This was the only way to make the Blood Clan fear him. When his image in the Blood Clan's mind evolved into a person who was even more vicious than them, the psychological defense of the Blood Clan would collapse. The process of torturing the Blood Clan was also a psychological game. Huang Liang, who was old, understood this principle. Another Blood Clan member was brought out. Although his expression was still vicious, there was a trace of fear in his eyes when he looked at Huang Liang. Their comrade was tortured to death by the thunder technique. No matter how strong the Blood Clan's bones were, it was impossible for them to remain indifferent. Following the same pattern, Huang Liang asked a question and gave the Blood Clan a thunder technique. However, no matter how the Blood Clan members were tortured, they did not relent. Some of them scolded Huang Liang loudly. Some of them took the initiative to attack Huang Liang in order to die quickly. There were also Blood Clan members who clenched their teeth from the beginning to the end. They did not make a sound until their teeth were crushed. After an hour, there were 4 more corpses of the Blood Clan. However, they did not obtain any information about the Blood Clan. They did not even find out the names of these Blood Clan members. Everyone's expression became serious. If a Blood Clan member was so stubborn, it might be due to their nature. However, if every Blood Clan member was like this, then it was a characteristic of their race. Not only were these extraterrestrial visitors extremely aggressive and cunning, they also had an extremely tenacious nature. Facing such an enemy was undoubtedly a nightmare. The 4th Blood Clan member died. Huang Liang looked at the remaining Blood Clan members, and his expression became hesitant. It was not that he had any moral burden. As a cultivator of the Dragon Soaring realm and the sect master of the Imperial Heavenly Sect, he would not have any sympathy for these invaders. That was because being merciful to the enemy was being cruel to one's own people. If he could find out information about the Blood Clan, he might be able to reduce the casualties of the Dragon Soaring realm. However, he could see that with the current development of the situation, even if he tortured all the Blood Clan members here to death, he might not be able to find out any useful information. It was not easy to capture a Blood Clan member alive. If he missed this opportunity, it might be difficult to find another way to obtain information. The few Blood Clan members undoubtedly saw his hesitation and started to provoke him. Sigh. Huang Liang sighed. Once he hesitated, his momentum would weaken. His moment of hesitation had undoubtedly made all his previous efforts useless. He turned to look at Yuan Changzhen. Is there anyone in the Howren Academy who is proficient in torture and interrogation? He did not ask Master Guangjing. The great monks of the Titanium Temple had always been merciful. How could they have such methods? Yuan Changzhen said leisurely, the academy is full of scholars. Why would a scholar interrogate someone by torture? That would not be a disgrace. In the end, the three great overlord sects were all brilliant sections. None of them were proficient in such underhanded methods. When they needed to use it, they would realize that no one could use it. I heard the screams from afar. I thought you were doing something. A gentle voice suddenly came from behind. Everyone looked over and found that it was the little fairy doctor. She stood beside Lu Yi and said, "Did you get anything out of them?" Huang Liang smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I did not get anything out of them." The little fairy doctor's expression was gentle. "How about letting me try?" Huang Liang was surprised. "Of course you can try, but these Blood Clan members are very stubborn." The little fairy doctor smiled kindly. "There's no harm in trying. If they are stubborn, it doesn't mean that you can't pry them open." Lu Yi narrowed his eyes and instinctively distanced himself from the little fairy doctor. The little fairy doctor sensed something and looked at him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I just thought of an old friend." The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched slightly. They were both medical cultivators, had the same face, and showed the same kind smile. Lu Yi couldn't help but have some unpleasant memories. Little friend's old friend must be a very interesting person. That's why little friend can't forget him. The fairy doctor smiled sweetly. She looked at the guards. "I'll have to trouble you to bring them out." The guards looked at Huang Liang with inquiring eyes. Huang Liang pondered for a moment and nodded slightly. 7017K. Chapter 723. The remaining blood breeds were all brought out. Under the fairy doctor's instructions, the cultivators guarding them were in charge of one blood breeds each, firmly controlling them and preventing them from moving. Looking at the beautiful and voluptuous woman in front of them, the blood breeds all revealed expressions of disdain. Even Huang Liang's cruel methods had not been able to subdue them. What could such a woman with a temperament as gentle as water do? The fairy doctor slowly walked in front of one of the blood breeds and softly said, "These 2 days, I took the time to study some of the corpses of the blood breeds. I found that the blood breed's body structure is not much different from our soaring dragon realm's cultivators. They also have flesh and blood. When they are injured, they will bleed. When they are heavily injured, they will die. Although they are outsiders, it seems that they are from a different world from the soaring dragon realm." As she spoke, she suddenly raised her hand and pointed at the body of the blood breeds in front of her. A cold light flashed past. Lu Yi and the others who were standing nearby could clearly see that the flash of cold light was actually a needle smaller than a strand of hair. The fairy doctor's fingers trembled and continuously flicked across various parts of the blood breed's body. One after another, thin needles were flicked into the blood breed's bodies. The blood breed's expression did not change. He frowned and asked, "What did you do?" He could feel that there were some foreign objects in his body, but he did not feel any discomfort. Therefore, he did not understand what the fairy doctor was doing. "Don't be anxious." The fairy doctor smiled at him and walked in front of the second blood breeds. Her jade-like hands trembled again. Very quickly, many thin needles appeared in the second blood breed's body. Using this method one after another, the living blood breeds were all inexplicably implanted by her. Only then did the fairy doctor retreat. Her eyes were curved and she smiled innocently. She said to the few blood breeds, "You guys, whoever speaks first will die a quick death." The few blood breeds sneered. The first blood breeds even sneered, "Wishful thinking. Don't be so absolute." That gentle tone did not seem to be threatening the enemy. Instead, it seemed like she was acting coquettishly. Just as she finished speaking, the first blood beads that were implanted by her suddenly changed expression. His entire body seemed to be enduring unimaginable torture and pain as he suddenly screamed. That cry was extremely mournful, startling the soaring dragon cultivators guarding him. Immediately after, the Blood Clan member held his head and knelt on the ground. His eyes were instantly filled with blood vessels as he screamed incessantly. Another blood-curdling scream was heard. It was the reaction of the second member of the Blood Clan who had been implanted. Then came the third, the fourth. Even though Huang Liang and the others had seen their fair share of storms, they couldn't help but feel their scalps go numb. Just now, when he used the thunder technique to torture these Blood Clan members, they didn't seem to have such a big reaction. This little fairy doctor, who was known for saving lives and curing illnesses, what method did she use to silently make the Blood Clan members suffer such pain? For a moment, the way the elders looked at her changed. Lu Yi, on the other hand, was already mentally prepared for this. She thought to herself that it was indeed the case. Any woman who was beautiful, big and round, and was usually as gentle as water, had another side of humanity. Terrifying. Terrifying. The faction of medical cultivators was indeed full of hidden talents. They knew how to save people, so naturally, they knew how to harm people better than others. Lu Yi secretly warned herself that in the future, if she met any hostile medical cultivators in the 9 regions, she absolutely couldn't let her guard down. Only God knew if they had any unknown methods. The blood-curdling screams were getting louder and louder. Many cultivators who came and went looked over her, but no one knew what was going on. However, after seeing the figures of Huang Liang and the others, they faintly sensed something and didn't go forward to disturb them. In front of the trapping array, the little fairy doctor's voice sounded again. "Remember what I said just now. I won't repeat it a second time." When her voice fell, 2 Blood Clan members scrambled to speak. "I'll speak, I'll speak." Since the little fairy doctor made her move, it had only been half a cup of tea's time. The Blood Clan members, who made Huang Liang helpless, had their psychological defenses broken under the endless torture and pain. Huang Liang and the others were all shocked. At the same time, their hearts were filled with joy. Fortunately, this was the little fairy doctor, a soaring dragon cultivator. If the Blood Clan had such methods, it would be too terrifying. "Then you speak." The little fairy doctor pointed at the Blood Clan member who spoke first. "Tell me everything you know about the Blood Clan, the Blood World, and don't hide anything." As she spoke, she suddenly raised her hand and pressed it on the Blood Clan member's chest. When she retracted her hand, there were more than 10 thin needles in her palm. It wasn't that she was compassionate, but under such torture, the Blood Clan member couldn't speak a complete sentence. The boundless pain quickly dissipated, but the blood-curdling screams of his companions were still incessant. Thinking back to what happened just now, the Blood Clan member couldn't help but shudder. He didn't dare to hesitate anymore and said in a hoarse voice, "The blood world is a flowing domain that lives by plundering." Amidst the endless screams of the other Blood Clan members, this Blood Clan member tirelessly told everything he knew. He really didn't dare to hide anything. His companions were all listening. If he hid anything, his companions would definitely interrupt. At that time, he would have to endure that kind of torture again. Time passed. As they continued to understand the blood world and the Blood Clan, the expressions of Huang Liang and the others were as solemn as water. This was because the information revealed by the Blood Clan was indeed somewhat inconceivable. In this vast void, the soaring dragon realm wasn't the only realm. Everyone was mentally prepared for this. Before the Blood Clan, the soaring dragon realm had an extraterrestrial object like the Dragon Emperor. Since there were extraterrestrial objects, it meant that there were other realms. The blood world was one of the realms in this vast void. However, unlike most realms that were fixed in a certain position in the void, the blood world was a flowing domain. The characteristic of the entire blood world was plundering. In the process of flowing, if it encountered other realms, the blood world would attach itself to it, plundering and absorbing the resources of the realms it encountered to strengthen itself. Every realm had its own resources. The strength of a realm's resources was directly related to the strength of the living beings that lived in the realm. This kind of resources could be said to be the foundation of a realm. It was the origin of the realm. For example, the realm of beasts that Lu Yi had entered previously wasn't very strong. This was because the cultivators that lived there were at most Cloud River tier cultivators. However, the realm of beasts wasn't the realm with the weakest resources. Perhaps in the vast void, there were even weaker realms. In those realms, there might be no civilization born, or there might be no cultivators. They were just a bunch of ordinary people. The Soaring Dragon Realm's resources were undoubtedly stronger than the realm of beasts. It could even compete with the 9 prefectures because there had been divine ocean-tier cultivators here. If it had always been like this, the Soaring Dragon Realm wouldn't have changed much. However, since 800 years ago, when the Blood World drifted near the Soaring Dragon Realm, a drastic change occurred. A ravine that would never disappear appeared in the extreme north. The ravine was formed because of the Blood World's attachment. It was the power of the Blood World that tore a hole in the Soaring Dragon Realm. It was like a leech attached to a human body. In 800 years, the leech that was the Blood World kept plundering the resources of the Soaring Dragon Realm, causing the foundation of the Soaring Dragon Realm to constantly fade. As a result, the upper limit of the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm kept decreasing. From Divine Ocean tier to True Lake tier, from True Lake tier to Cloud River tier. In a few hundred years, they might only be at Spirit Stream tier. The absorption and plundering of the world was never a simple matter. It could easily take hundreds or even thousands of years. Even though the resources of the Soaring Dragon Realm would be completely depleted in another few hundred or thousand years, the Blood Breeds still invaded. Because their invasion could speed up the plundering process. This was also the standard process that the Blood World and the Blood Breed used to plunder other realms. First, the Blood World would absorb and absorb, weakening the living beings in the plundered realms. Then, they would invade forcefully and speed up the plundering process. When they chose to invade, the plundered realms would have no power to resist. In fact, if Lu Yi hadn't set up a great formation in the Medicine Valley this time and saved the Soaring Dragon Realm's cultivators, everyone would have died in the previous battle. Once those cultivators died in battle, how could the Soaring Dragon Realm resist the Blood Breed? However, it wasn't easy for the Blood Breed to invade other realms. Heaven and earth had spirits, especially in a realm like the Soaring Dragon Realm that could nurture groups of cultivators. The will of heaven and earth was everywhere. Perhaps this will didn't have spiritual intelligence, but when heaven and earth were in danger, there would definitely be some reaction. This was also the reason why heroes were born in troubled times. These heroes all carried great fortune on their backs. They were the manifestation of heaven and earth's will in dealing with great disasters. Disasters in heaven and earth could trigger a reaction from heaven and earth. If there were external enemies invading, it would be even more intense. Therefore, if the Blood Breed wanted to invade other realms, they had to have an insider. Without an insider, they couldn't force their way in. In the Soaring Dragon Realm, the Heavenly Gorge sect played such a role. The sect leader of the Heavenly Gorge sect, Sky Sage, had been comprehending the secrets of the gorge for decades. Therefore, he had some unknown connections with the Blood Breed. The Blood River Great Formation was passed down by the Blood Breed to guide the Blood Breed to this realm. Even so, after the Blood Breed arrived in the Soaring Dragon Realm, they were still affected by heaven and earth. Even true Lake Realm Blood Breeds could only unleash peak Cloud River Realm strength in the Soaring Dragon Realm. This was the same rule as the Spirit Stream battlefield in the 9 states. The suppression of heaven and earth wasn't something that an individual could resist. Only a similar heaven and earth could resist. Now that the Blood Breed had invaded, they hadn't made any moves or made a comeback in the past 2 days. It wasn't that they didn't want to avenge their dead clansmen, but that they had more important things to do. They were building a special altar to guide the complete descent of the Blood Realm. Once the Blood Realm completely descended, the Soaring Dragon Realm's foundation would be plundered clean in an extremely short period of time. When that time came, they would be able to get their revenge. 7017K. Chapter 724. The Blood Clan's target had always been the Soaring Dragon Realm, not the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm. They had chased after the Soaring Dragon Realm in order to weaken the resistance of the Soaring Dragon Realm. Since they had failed and suffered heavy losses, the Blood Clan had simply ignored them. Moreover, traveling between two realms was not as easy as one would think. Even with the help of the Heavenly Gorge sect, who had set up the Blood River formation, the first batch of Blood Clan members who could enter the Soaring Dragon Realm would not be many. Therefore, what the Blood Clan needed to do now was to quickly build an altar to guide the descent of the Blood Realm as well as more of their people. Once the Blood Clan completed their plan, the destruction of the Soaring Dragon Realm would be imminent. The Blood Clan member who was pointed out by the fairy doctor told her everything that he knew, amidst the miserable cries of the other Blood Clan members beside him. The situation was much more serious than they had imagined. Based on the limited information they had, Huang Liang and the others had thought that the descent of the Blood Clan was an enemy invasion. If that was the case, they only needed to think of a way to defeat the enemy. However, now it seemed that this was not just the invasion of the Blood Clan. The greater danger came from the descent of the Blood Realm. This was a disaster that targeted the entire realm. Moreover, things had happened too suddenly. The Soaring Dragon Realm was not prepared at all. Although the news had spread through various channels and basically all the cultivators knew about the Blood Clan, the real situation was only known to a few people present. This is a serious matter. We have to announce it to the world. Yuan Changxuan's expression was serious. The Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators had to know what kind of enemy they were facing and what kind of situation they were in. This way, the cultivators would know that they had no way out in the face of the Blood Clan. Any retreat would only lead to eternal damnation. In these 2 days, a large number of cultivators in the Soaring Dragon Realm had rushed to the north under the call of the 3 overlord sects to prepare to defend against the enemy. However, there were also some with ulterior motives who wanted to rely on the Blood Clan. In their opinion, if the Heavenly Gorge sect could rely on the Blood Clan, so could they. The Blood Clan had already displayed great power. Perhaps the Heavenly Saints' plan for the Soaring Dragon Realm was not as bad as they had imagined. However, if these people knew the Blood Clan's real plan, they might not think that way. Huang Liang and Master Guangjing nodded. They would not hide such important information. Not only could they not hide it, but they would also spread it as much as possible. Let's hurry up. Huang Liang's eyes were filled with worry. We have to be faster than the blood race. We can't let them finish building that so-called traction altar. Once it's completed, Soaring Dragon will die. Originally, the Soaring Dragon Realm had a natural front line against the blood breeds with the Medicine Valley's Great Array. However, from the looks of it now, the Medicine Valley's Great Array was no longer of much use. Soaring Dragon's side did not have the qualifications to passively defend. They had to take the initiative to attack. Even if they had to pay with their lives, they had to stop the blood breed's plan of building the traction altar. Just as the 3 of them were talking, there seemed to be another change in the distant void. Everyone sensed something and raised their heads to look in the direction of the ravine. They saw that in the vast ravine that stretched across the void, there was a dense blood-red light, as if a river of blood was pouring down. One of the vampires, who was howling miserably, suddenly let out a sharp laugh. My vampire's reinforcements have arrived. We're all dead. The fairy doctor turned her head and looked at him. She raised her hand and shot out a few flying needles. They pierced into the Blood Clan member's body, causing his already mournful screams to become even more tragic. When the other vampires saw this, they were all filled with fear. They only felt that this human woman was more terrifying than all the creatures they had ever seen. Everyone was not quite sure what the change in the ravine was, but after listening to the Blood Clan members' words, they immediately understood that something worse had happened. The first batch of vampires to descend upon Soaring Dragon was not many. They had suffered heavy casualties in the Medicine Valley battle. At that time, if the Soaring Dragon Realm had used the power of a realm to attack, they might have been able to repel the vampires. However, now that the vampires had received reinforcements, it would be difficult to achieve this. Huang Liang and the others were very upset for a moment. However, on second thought, Even if they had known this information before, it would have been useless. This was because it would take time for the Soaring Dragon realm to gather manpower. There was no time to launch such a large-scale war in a hurry. In fact, the cultivators of Soaring Dragon were still on their way to this day. It would take 1 or 2 days to reach Snow Province if they were fast, and it might take 3 to 5 days if they were slow. Huang Liang and the others hurriedly left. They wanted to quickly spread the information they had just found out so that the cultivators who came to support could speed up. Only Lu Yi, the little fairy doctor, and the cultivators guarding the vampires were left. The little fairy doctor looked at the vampires who had revealed the information and smiled slightly. I mean what I say. The vampires heaved a long sigh of relief, and then a bright saber light flashed in front of his eyes. The saber light flashed again, and the vampires who were still screaming died one by one. Lu Yi sheathed his saber. The little fairy doctor looked at him in surprise. Why did you kill them all? Didn't they say that whoever spoke first would have a quick death? Wouldn't this make it seem like she was going back on her word? Since we already have information, it's useless to keep it. It's so noisy. Lu Yi explained lightly. In fact, he was calming his mind and checking his battlefield imprint. In the battlefield imprint, the line that recorded the battle merits was marked 29,718 points. The number of battle merits worth nearly 2 golden spiritual sticks. When he entered the Soaring Dragon realm, Lu Yi was filled with anticipation. Because of his previous experience in the realm of beasts, he knew that it was very likely that he would be able to obtain things like battle merits in a secret realm with a realm as its background. He had obtained a huge amount of battle merits in the Tianyuan city's realm, but he had exchanged them all for soul water. It was a good deal. After all, there were always other ways to obtain battle merits, but soul water could only be obtained from Tianyuan City. It was because of his gains in Tianyuan City that he could go to the 100 Formation Pagoda without any scruples and obtain even more rewards. But there was still some regret. For him, the most urgent thing now was to use his battle merits to exchange for spiritual sticks and increase his cultivation. Only then could he have enough power to protect himself on the Cloudy River battlefield. He thought that the Soaring Dragon realm was an opportunity. However, the result disappointed Lu Yi greatly. He had killed a number of people, but not only did he not gain any merit points, he did not even gain any merit points. But surprises always came when one wasn't expecting them. When the Blood Clan invaded and attacked the Medicine Valley, he guarded the center of the formation and cooperated with the Soaring Dragon cultivators to kill the enemy. While he became famous in one battle, he also obtained a lot of battle merits. In the Battle of the Medicine Valley, none of the Blood Clan members died directly at Lu Ye's hands. They were all killed by the Soaring Dragon cultivators with Lu Ye's cooperation. But even so, his contribution in the Battle of the Medicine Valley could not be erased. Lu Yi guessed that this was the source of the large amount of battle merits. The way to obtain battle merits and merits were not the same. Merits could only be obtained by killing enemies. How many merits could be obtained depended on the type of enemy killed. But battle merits did not necessarily have to be obtained by killing enemies personally. In a battle, one could also obtain battle merits based on how much strength one contributed. Heaven's Secrets had its own criteria for judgment. In the Battle of the Medicine Valley, even if Lu Yi did not personally kill any Blood Clan members, he had contributed greatly to their victory. That was why he could obtain so many battle merits. He vaguely remembered that after the Tianyuan City realm, he was only left with 836 points. Now, he had nearly 30,000 points. It was clear that he had obtained a lot in the Battle of the Medicine Valley. To Lu Yi, the Blood Clan was equivalent to battle merits. Now that he could easily obtain battle merits, how could he hesitate? Mosquito meat was still meat. Moreover, the 4 Blood Clan members had brought him nearly 200 battle merits, which was worth a white spirit stick. Just as he was investigating, a message suddenly came from the battlefield imprint. Lu Yi hurriedly checked it, then grabbed the fairy doctor's arm and rushed toward the straw hut. Lioli's illness is acting up again. There were abnormal movements over at the ravine. The Blood Clan reinforcements had arrived and once again imprinted on Yi Lioli's body. They quickly arrived at the straw hut. The fairy doctor went up to treat Yi Lioli and spent a lot of effort to stabilize her condition. Walking out of the straw hut, she saw Lu Yi gazing at the ravine on the horizon with a focused expression. She asked, "What are you thinking about?" Lu Yi said leisurely, "Clothes can be mended if they're torn, but how do you mend the ravine?" Although it was a question, Lu Yi already had an answer in his heart. Looking at all the signs, the ravine was the only way to completely eliminate Yi Lioli's illness. The formation of the ravine was directly related to the absorption of the blood realm. Therefore, the only way to mend the ravine was to make the blood realm retreat and leave the soaring dragon realm voluntarily. In this way, without the blood realm's attachment and absorption, the ravine would naturally be able to slowly repair itself. But to achieve this, there was a prerequisite: to repel the invading Blood Clan. To make the Blood Clan not dare to invade the soaring dragon realm through the ravine. At this point, Lu Yi could already vaguely feel that there was only one final goal for his trip to the soaring dragon realm: mend the ravine. If he could complete this, he would definitely obtain more battle merits than the Battle of the Medicine Valley. He more or less understood why the entrance to this mystic realm was a broken teleportation array. That entrance was obviously a test. Only by repairing that broken teleportation array would he be qualified to enter this realm and carry out his plan to mend the ravine. He had a vague plan in his heart, but to carry out this plan, he still needed a lot of help. What made him rejoice was that the soaring dragon realm's cultivation world was able to react quickly in the face of such a calamity. This was inseparable from the long-established three great overlord sects. And Huang Liang and the rest were extremely friendly to him these few days. This unknowingly reduced the resistance to his plan. The news of the Blood Clan's blood realm was still fermenting among the cultivators of the soaring dragon realm. An even richer and more terrifying news came from the three great overlord sects, 7017K. Chapter 725. The source of the ravine's appearance and the reason behind the cultivation world's decline were only known today. For a moment, the entire dragon soaring realm's cultivation world was agitated. In the past 800 years, many heroes had emerged in the dragon soaring realm's cultivation world. However, because of the changes in the world, their cultivation path was blocked. Previously, they did not know the reason, but now that they knew it was all because of the blood realm's absorption, who would not be angry? The blood realm's ultimate goal was to devour the entire dragon soaring realm's foundation. If that was the case, dragon soaring realm would definitely perish. When the nest was overturned, no egg would remain intact. The cultivators were all dragon soaring realm's cultivators. If dragon soaring realm perished, they would naturally not be able to survive. If they wanted to live, they had to kill all the blood race. For a moment, the dragon soaring realm's cultivators showed an extremely strong hatred towards the blood race, this foreign enemy that had suddenly descended. They were determined to kill them all. Under the ravine, a large number of blood race members gathered, causing the place to be filled with a bloody aura. The blood in the Great Blood River Formation, which covered a radius of dozens of miles, had already dried up. However, there were still dark red stains left in the ravines. The spot where the altar originally stood had been replaced by a gigantic altar that occupied an area of an area. The altar was in the shape of a six-pointed star. All kinds of mysterious and complex patterns appeared and disappeared on it, making the entire altar look like a living thing. The constantly flashing light was the altar's breathing. The blood race's efficiency was undoubtedly extremely high. Since they invaded the dragon soaring realm, it had only been a few days, but they had already built such a complicated altar. The materials needed to build the altar were all brought by the blood race from the blood realm. It was obviously not the first time they had done this, so they were extremely skilled. There were specialized blood race members in charge of pursuing the native enemies, and there were also blood race members in charge of defense. There were also blood race members in charge of building the altar. The moment the altar was built, a bloody light surged into the ravine. Then, as if the ravine was bleeding, the blood river overturned, and a large number of blood race members descended upon the dragon's soaring realm. Xing Mo and Cheng Henfeng, who was missing an arm, followed behind the heavenly saint. They looked at this scene from afar, and their emotions were extremely complicated. They were undoubtedly extremely lucky to have been able to preserve their lives in the previous conflict. However, in their current state, they didn't know whether they should be happy or angry. The Blood Clan had planted an extremely peculiar secret technique on them. According to Xue Xiao, it was the Blood Slave Seal. The one who was planted with this seal would become the Blood Slave of the Blood Clan. Slave. To experts like them who already stood at the peak of a world, the word slave was undoubtedly a humiliating word. However, they did not dare to voice their anger. Not to mention the terrifying foundation that the Blood Kindred had displayed, just the seal that they had cast was enough to easily control their life and death. They could feel that with the Dharma seal, any member of the blood race, even if they were far weaker than them, could easily kill them. The Heavenly Saints and the surviving cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge sect felt the same way. Now, they had completely become the slaves of the blood race. Heavenly Saint, is this the way out you found? Xing Mo asked softly, feeling bitter inside. After paying such a huge price, what was the point of finding a way out? The Heavenly Saint did not speak, but both Xing Mo and Cheng Henfeng could feel the turmoil in his heart. When a member of the blood race passed by, the three of them hurriedly bowed, appearing extremely humble. They had already suffered a loss before, so they knew how to behave in front of these blood race members. Sect Master, save me! A mournful cry was heard. Xing Mo turned his head and saw a beautiful woman with fair skin being held in the hands of a blood race member. She was screaming in fear. That was the 31st elder of the sect, a rare female expert of the Heavenly Gorge sect. Normally, she was an extremely strong-willed woman, but now, she seemed so helpless. The Heavenly Saint was still bowing as if he did not hear anything. Xing Mo and Cheng Henfeng almost broke their teeth from clenching their teeth. Anger surged in their hearts, but they did not dare to act rashly. The blood race members smiled maliciously and bit the 31st elder's slender neck. Gulping sounds were heard, and the 31st elder's screams gradually weakened and disappeared completely. When the blood race member left in satisfaction, the originally beautiful 31st elder had become a withered corpse that was casually thrown on the ground. Many cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge sect had survived the previous battle, but they had not survived the blood race's rampage. In the past few days, countless cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge sect had died tragically at the hands of the blood race. To the blood race, these blood slaves were like livestock that they could take as they pleased. No blood race member cared about what they thought. What shocked them even more was that these blood race members actually sucked human blood. The Heavenly Gorge sect was filled with all kinds of evil people. Xing Mo and Cheng Henfeng were experienced and knowledgeable people, but there was a limit to how evil the cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge sect could be. Sucking human blood. This was something that they did not even dare to think about. From what they had observed, it seemed that every blood race member had such a hobby or ability. They could drink human blood to strengthen themselves. Xing Mo and Cheng Henfeng had felt the greedy eyes of the blood race members on them more than once in the past few days. Fortunately, they had been following the Heavenly Sage, who had been personally planted with the blood slave dermic seal by the blood owl. Therefore, ordinary blood race members did not dare to treat them that way for the time being. But who could guarantee that they would always be safe? Xing Mo suddenly faintly sensed something and raised his head to look into the distance. He saw the silhouettes of numerous large ships in the horizon, and the figures of numerous cultivators were moving about freely on the ships and on the sides of them. They're finally here. Cheng Henfeng heaved a long sigh. The blood race's invasion could not be ignored by the dragon race's cultivation world. Previously, the dragon race had been caught off guard and suffered heavy casualties. Then, the blood race had chased them down and forced them to flee. No one knew what had happened after that, but the blood race was almost completely wiped out. Only a few hundred people had managed to escape. Now that a few days had passed, the dragon race's cultivation world should have gathered a lot of information. They would definitely take action in the face of such a calamity. There were countless spirit ships as far as the eye could see. They were much larger than the Heavenly Gorge sect that the dragon race's cultivation world had attacked a few days ago. No matter what, the last time was just an internal conflict. Today, they were trying to get rid of an external threat. The dragon race was going all out. Destroy them as soon as possible. Cheng Henfeng thought viciously. He could not help but feel a sense of relief. The blood race had naturally sensed such a huge commotion from the dragon race's cultivation world. However, they were not afraid. Instead, they were filled with fighting spirit. They came from the blood realm. How could they take a group of human cultivators who were only at the Cloud River tier seriously? The blood race had destroyed more than 1 or 2 realms like the Soaring Dragon realm. In the long history of the blood world, countless realms like the Soaring Dragon realm had been sucked into empty shells by the blood race and turned into barren lands by the blood race. They had not taken action before, not because they were afraid of the dragon race's cultivators, but because they could not leave. Now that the dragon race's cultivators had taken the initiative to come to their doorstep, wasn't this exactly what they wanted? As a race that relied on invasion and plunder, the blood race's belligerence and ferocity were incomparable to the dragon race's cultivators. Without needing Xue Xiao to give the order, a large number of blood race members moved. Even though their fighting spirit was boiling, the blood race did not take the initiative to attack. Instead, they took a defensive stance and formed a dense and solid line of defense. Their most important task now was not to attack and kill the enemy, but to protect the attraction altar. The altar had been completed. The connection between the blood realm and the dragon race would become closer and closer. As time passed, more blood race would descend into this realm. If they could build more altars, this process would be greatly accelerated. The more altars there were, the less time it would take for the blood realm to devour the dragon race. Do what you want to do. Don't be an eyesore by my side. The heavenly saint, who had been silent for the past few days, suddenly spoke. Xing Mo and Cheng Henfeng were shocked. They immediately bowed. Thank you, sect master. What they had seen and heard in the past few days made them realize that they would become food for the blood race sooner or later. The heavenly saint had the protection of Xue Xiao. The blood race could look down on him, but no one dared to rashly treat him as food. However, the two of them did not have such good luck. Therefore, if they wanted to live, they had to find a way to escape. The dragon race's cultivator's large-scale attack was undoubtedly an opportunity. The heavenly saint's words showed that he had seen through their intentions. After thanking him, the two of them turned to leave. However, at this moment, the heavenly saint suddenly stretched out his hand. Spiritual energy surged in his body, and he hit the back of the two of them. The two of them flew high into the air like kites with broken strings. They both spat out blood. Xing Mo spat out pieces of his internal organs. When he turned around in shock, he only saw the heavenly saint's cold face. He was instantly filled with grief and indignation. Heavenly saint, you will die a horrible death. Cheng Henfeng did not curse. Instead, he brazenly attacked with his sword. The sword light was piercingly cold as it enveloped a few blood race members nearby. This was the last sword of his life. Cheng Henfeng used all his strength. The space seemed to have been cut open. The few blood race members who were caught off guard were directly turned into pieces of flesh. The cuts were neat and smooth. However, this was the end. In the next moment, Xing Mo and Cheng Henfeng's bodies suddenly froze. Their skin turned red, as if their blood had started to boil. Some blood race members had activated the blood slave seal in their bodies. The nearby blood race members swarmed forward and surrounded them. Through the crowd, Cheng Henfeng finally saw a flash of blood-red light in the heavenly saint's eyes. Only then did he understand that the heavenly saint's mind had long been corrupted by the blood race's secret technique. He was loyal and devoted to the blood race. He was different from them, who had been implanted with the blood slave seal. They were loyal on the surface but not on the surface. At the same time, all the blood race members near the surviving Heavenly Gorge sect cultivators began to move. The blood-curdling screams did not stop. In just a few breaths, everything quieted down. The vampires dispersed, and withered corpses could be seen everywhere. As if they had just experienced a blood sacrifice, the blood race members' fighting spirit soared. 7017K. Chapter 726. Snow Province was located in the north of Soaring Dragon territory. The land was bitter and the weather was cold. Not only were there few people, but the environment was also worse than other places in Soaring Dragon territory. The sky of Snow Province was shrouded in thick dark clouds all year round, and it was rare to see the sun. However, on this day, as the huge fleet of spirit ships continued to move forward, the dark clouds that had accumulated over the years began to dissipate. Wherever the fleet went, the sun shone. Almost all the cultivators of Soaring Dragon territory felt like they were being blessed by the heavens. On the leading ship stood several figures. It was Huang Liang, Yuan Chang Xiyuan, Guang Jing, and the others. Looking at the scene in the distance, the three of them had solemn expressions. The previous battle had shown them the power and treachery of the blood race. This time, it could be said that the Soaring Dragon territory's cultivation world had turned out in full force. If they couldn't win this battle, then there would be no future for Soaring Dragon territory. It wasn't that they didn't want to know more about the blood race, but that they didn't have the time to do so. Based on the limited information they had, if the Soaring Dragon territory wanted to expel the foreign enemy, they could only end the battle quickly. The longer they delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for Soaring Dragon territory. Therefore, even though this battle was extremely hasty, Soaring Dragon territory could only bite the bullet and fight. While the three of them were observing the situation in the Heavenly Gully, they were also constantly exchanging their opinions. The cultivators of the three overlords' sect masters passed down the orders of the three overlords. Lu Yi stood not far from the three of them. Half a day ago, the Soaring Dragon territory cultivators in the Medicine Valley set off under the leadership of Huang Liang and the others. They joined the coalition forces from other places and advanced towards the Heavenly Gully. Naturally, Lu Yi followed. Not to mention that he had already seen through the ultimate goal of this trip to the Soaring Dragon territory's sealed world, which made it impossible for him to stay in the Medicine Valley alone. Even if he could obtain war merits from killing the blood race, he couldn't stay idle. His current cultivation was only at the 6th Order Cloud River realm. If he wanted to break through to the 7th Order, relying on less than 30,000 war merits was not enough. He needed more. This was a battle that could determine the life and death of a world. If he handled it well, the war merits would not be too little. Perhaps after this, he would have enough capital to break through to the 7th Order or even the 8th Order. Huang Liang and the others had finished their discussion. When they looked forward again, they saw a sanguine glow soaring into the sky from the heavenly ravine. Even from dozens of kilometers away, they could sense the dense battle intent of the vampires. Apart from the cultivators who had escaped into the Medicine Valley, the other cultivators had never come into contact with the Blood Tribe. However, everyone had heard news about the Blood Tribe in the past few days and knew about the treacherous secret techniques of the Blood Tribe. Therefore, many of them looked very nervous. On the ships, the teachers were comforting their disciples and stimulating their fighting spirit. Their impassioned voices rose and fell one after another. "Little friend, the battle will be extremely chaotic. You must be careful." Huang Liang turned his head and warned Lu Yi. Having already determined that Lu Yi was the savior of the world, Huang Liang was naturally more concerned about Lu Yi's safety than anyone else. Originally, he did not want to bring Lu Yi to such a dangerous place, but on second thought, if Lu Yi really was the savior of the world, no matter where he was, he would inevitably be involved in this storm. Rather than letting him stay in the Medicine Valley, it would be better to have him under his nose. This way, if there was any danger, he could take care of him. Junior will remember. Lu Yi nodded. After a moment of silence, Huang Liang whispered again, "Don't use the Dragon Emperor so easily. If Lu Yi really was the savior of the world, then the Dragon Emperor must be the means to save the world." It was the Dragon Ascension Realm's response to the Great Calamity, but the Dragon Emperor was too dangerous to use. Huang Liang was clear about Zhuang Bufan's fate. Lu Yi was only a 6th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator now, so once he used the Dragon Emperor, he would die immediately. Lu Yi nodded. He could not help but recall the previous scenes in his mind. Before Jianghu Fan died, he had given the Dragon Emperor to him, so he had not been idle these days and had been studying this divine artifact. Faintly, he had a feeling that the Dragon Emperor had some natural affinity with him. He did not know if Jianghu Fan had this feeling when he had the Dragon Emperor, and he did not know where to ask now, but it was very likely that he had not. The little fairy doctor had said that Jianghu Fan had not obtained the approval of the Dragon Emperor, so he could not control it. Forcefully using it would cause great harm to himself. But what if he obtained the approval of the Dragon Emperor? Would he be able to control it then? Lu Yi did not dare to try. If things were not as he thought, rashly trying would only worsen his situation. The reason why Jianghu Fan was on the verge of death was because after obtaining the Dragon Emperor, he had stimulated its power to see what it really was. At that time, he had not used it in battle. Over the past few days, whenever Lu Yi had free time, he would try to refine the Dragon Emperor. His progress was extremely smooth, and this divine artifact did not reject his spiritual energy at all. On the contrary, it seemed to be eager to accept him. Today, Lu Yi had completely refined the Dragon Emperor and could stimulate its power at any time. This was undoubtedly good news for him. No matter how bad the situation was, he still had a trump card he could use. The fleet continued to move forward, quickly crossing a few dozen kilometers. There was no pre-battle mobilization. Everything that needed to be said had already been said before they set off. Facing an invading enemy like the Blood Race, there was only one thing the Soaring Dragon cultivators needed to do. Kill all the Blood Race cultivators, and Soaring Dragon's crisis would be resolved. As the distance between the fleet and the Soaring Dragon cultivators got closer and closer, many Soaring Dragon cultivators secretly pushed their spiritual energy, ready to attack. 50,000 feet, 30,000 feet, 10,000 feet. The unique face of the Blood Race was already clearly imprinted in the eyes of the Soaring Dragon cultivators. Accompanied by a deafening buzzing sound, the ship that Lu Yi was on shook violently, and a light pillar as thick as a water bucket shot forward like a roaming thunderbolt. It was the formation on the spirit ship that had displayed its power. There were weapons like the flying dragon ships in the 9 prefectures that could be used to attack cities, and Soaring Dragon naturally had them as well. However, because the upper limit of Soaring Dragon cultivators was not high, this kind of spirit ship was much weaker than the flying dragon ships, and it was extremely difficult to build. In the whole Soaring Dragon realm, there were only 10 such warships in total, and they were all controlled by the 3 overlord sections. A few days ago, they had lost one in the battle, and now there were only 9 left. Now these 9 warships were all out, lined up in a row. At the same time the first buzzing sound rang out, the other 8 sounded almost at the same time. The light pillar that shot forward was not 1, but a total of 9. The distance of 10,000 feet was crossed in the blink of an eye. 9 extremely tyrannical attacks that Cloud River cultivators could not resist at all headed straight for the huge altar. Killing the Blood Tribe was admittedly important, but the attraction altar was even more important. As long as they could destroy the attraction altar, then they could delay the descent of the Blood Realm, and at the same time, leave the Blood Tribe alone. If they could do this, then Soaring Dragon would be in an invincible position in this battle. This was also the plan that Huang Liang and the others had discussed in advance. Pairs of eyes converged, and everyone's hearts were in their throats. The 9 light pillars carried with them an unstoppable force, and broke open 9 vacuum zones in the void, leaving behind clear marks wherever they passed. Some of the Blood Tribe members who had set up a formation at the front were accidentally hit by the light pillars, and directly turned into a bloody mist and disappeared without even the time to react. With such a terrifying power, no matter what the altar was built with, once it was hit, it would definitely be destroyed into nothingness. However, just as the 9 light pillars were about to land on the altar, a thick layer of blood-colored light suddenly appeared out of thin air, enveloping the entire altar. Boom, 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 as the loud sound rang out, the light pillars rippled on the blood-colored light barrier like concentric circles, continuously spreading out. Seeing this scene from afar, Huang Liang and the others clenched their teeth. Although they had expected it, when they saw the blood tribe setting up a protective array around the attraction altar with their own eyes, they were still unwilling to accept it. Ridiculous! In the blood tribe's camp, Xue Xiao looked at this scene indifferently with a calm expression. The blood tribe had invaded countless realms, and they were already familiar with how to deal with the situation in front of them. Therefore, no matter what the Soaring Dragon Realm side did, it was within the blood tribe's expectations. How could such an important existence like the attraction altar not have a protective array? Moreover, the array set up by the blood tribe was definitely not something the Soaring Dragon Realm could break. In other words, the invincible force in this battle was not Soaring Dragon, but the blood tribe. Again! Huang Liang shouted. Boom, 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 another round of attacks, and another 9 light pillars as thick as buckets blasted toward the altar like thunder dragons. However, other than creating ripples on the blood-colored light barrier, it did not have any effect at all. The power of this protective array had exceeded the limit of what the Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators could deal with. Again! Huang Liang shouted again. He didn't believe that the defensive formation could last forever. Boom, boom, boom. When the light pillars dissipated and the spiritual power calmed down, the scene imprinted in their eyes made them despair. Damn it! Huang Liang was so angry that his beard was trembling. Before he could give another order, Yuan Changtsuan stopped him. There's no way to continue. After 3 consecutive attacks in a short period of time, the spirit ship's array formation was somewhat overwhelmed. If another attack were to come, regardless of whether the protective array formation could withstand it or not, the spirit ship definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. Guang Jing sighed slightly. If he had known this would happen, he would have attacked the blood tribe's camp. At least there would be some damage to the blood tribe. However, this kind of attack took a long time to accumulate power, and it was not flexible enough. Therefore, it was usually used to attack a city. If it was used to deal with a single cultivator, the cultivator who sensed the danger would have run away long before the accumulation of power was completed. Therefore, even if it was used, the impact on the blood tribe would not be too great. Since the spirit ship was useless, they could only charge and kill. In this battle, it was unknown how many Soaring Dragon Realm cultivators would lose their lives here. With an incomparably sorrowful heart, Huang Liang raised his hand. Under everyone's gaze, he waved his hand down. Kill! In the next moment, the cultivators from the 3 overlord sects took the lead and flew into the air, brazenly charging toward the blood tribe's defensive line. Following closely behind the cultivators from the 3 overlord sects, the cultivators from the various forces of Soaring Dragon Realm also flew up. The battle had begun. 7017K, you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.